Ethical dilemmas can be difficult to resolve, so philosophers and ethics scholars have provided a set of four approaches to help managers. There's no single best approach, so managers should use a variety of them to get a complete understanding of the dilemma and make the best of the decisions. The four approaches to resolving ethical dilemmas from the text are: the utilitarian approach. This approach is guided by what will result in the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Managers often use this approach, relying on financial performance measures like efficiency and profit to guide their decisions. A drawback of this approach is that the decisions may damage employee morale and strip the organization of valuable skills and experience. For example, a utilitarian cost benefit analysis might find that firing thousands of employees would be good for the company's bottom line and provide short term benefits for the shareholders. The individual approach. This approach is guided by what will result in the individual's best long term interests, which ultimately are in everyone's self interest. The assumption is that you will act ethically in the short run to avoid harming others and you in the long run. A flaw in this approach is that one person's short term self gain may not be good for everyone in the long term. For instance, a series of dams placed on the Columbia and Snake Rivers helped mitigate water shortages and improve wheat exports, but the fishing industries downstream suffered because increased water temperature and blocked migration routes drastically reduced the number of fish. This is one reason why Puget Sound Chinook or king salmon have been threatened with extinction in the Pacific Northwest. The moral rights approach. This approach is guided by respect for the fundamental rights of human beings, such as those in the United States Constitution's Bill of Rights. This includes rights like the right to life, liberty, privacy, health and safety, and due process. The difficulty with this approach is when rights are in conflict, such as with employer and employee rights. For example, does an employee's right to medical privacy supersede the co-worker's right to a healthy, safe workplace if the employee has a highly contagious disease? The justice approach. This approach is guided by respect for impartial standards of fairness and equity. This includes whether an organization's policies, such as those for promotions or sexual harassment, are administered fairly regardless of an employee's membership in a protected class. Fairness is important to employees, and many are resentful when the CEO's pay is hundreds times higher than the employee's pay, or when fired CEOs receive an extravagant package of separation pay benefits. Here are specific examples for each of the four approaches resolving ethical dilemmas. The utilitarian approach. A company decides to close a factory and lay off thousands of employees in a small town. The decision is made because a cost-benefit analysis shows that closing the factory will improve the company's overall financial performance and provide immediate benefits for the shareholders. This decision, while damaging to the workforce and the community, is considered ethical under this approach because it results in the greatest good for the greatest number of people, the shareholder. The individual approach. An employee finds a wallet full of cash in the office break room. Instead of keeping the money, they turn it in to lost and found. The employee reasons that while keeping the money would provide a short-term gain, acting honestly will build goodwill and a reputation to prevent them from facing consequences later, which is in their best long-term interest. The action is based on the idea of acting ethically in the short term will prevent others from harming them in the long run. The moral rights approach. An employer is faced with an employee who is suffering from a highly contagious disease, but insists on coming to work. Citing their right to privacy regarding their medical information, using this approach, the employer must weigh the employee's right to privacy against the coworker's right to work in a healthy and safe environment. A decision to require the employee to stay home would be based on respecting the fundamental rights of the coworkers to health and safety, as this right is seen as superseding the individual employee's right to privacy in this specific situation. The justice approach. The company's promotion policy states that promotions are based solely on merit and performance. However, a manager consistently promotes people from a particular protected class over more qualified candidates from other groups. An employee who is part of a different protected class was overlooked for promotion despite having a better performance, records point out the unfairness. The company, using the justice approach, would need to address to ensure that these policies are administered impartially and fairly, regardless of the employee's protected class, and to correct the injustice. Pros and cons. The utilitarian approach. Pros. This approach often uses financial performance, such as efficiency and profit, to guide decisions which can lead to immediate benefits for shareholders and the company's bottom line. Cons. A drawback of this approach is that they may lead to decisions that harm workforce morale and cause the organization to lose valuable employees with important skills and experience. The individual approach. Pros. The assumption is that you will act ethically in the short term to prevent others from harming you in the long run. Ethical behavior in this approach is guided by what will result in the individual's best long-term interests, which ultimately are in everyone's self-interest. Cons. The flaw is that a single person's short-term gain may not actually be good for everyone in the long term. For example, the construction of dams helped the water shortages and the wheat exports, but harmed the downstream fishing industries. The moral right approach. Pros. This approach is guided by respect for the fundamental rights of human beings, such as the rights to life, liberty, privacy, health and safety, and due process. Cons. The difficulty with this approach is that it can be challenging when rights are in conflict, such as employer and employee rights. For instance, an employer's right to privacy about their medical condition may conflict with their coworkers' right to have a safe and healthy workplace. The justice approach. Pros. This approach is guided by respecting impartial standards of fairness and equity. This can include ensuring that an organization's policies, such as those for promotion or handling sexual harassment, are administered fairly to everyone, regardless of membership in a protected class. Cons. Employees can become resentful when they perceive a lack of fairness, such as when a CEO's pay is significantly higher than their own, or when a CEO fired for ethical violations still receives an extravagant separation package. Be careful with the word equity. The example assumes a pay difference in excess for classes of work. Equity can also be considered an inequality of outcome. Should the CEO be compensated more than the part-time clerk? Is equity putting your thumb on the scale for specific groups such as race, sex, religion, or so on? Careful with this one. Explain what you mean specifically so the word equity means what you mean it to mean. The same can be said with DEI policies. Again, what do you mean when you're using the words diversity, equity, and inclusion? Words matter. With an ethical dilemma, there is rarely a solution that will satisfy all involved. Some will be perceived as winners and others losers. My recommendation is to be very specific on the reason for selecting the approach and explain that reasoning. The perceived loser may not like the decision, but at least the decision can be defended.